And it's going to be a difficult live stream, at least at the outset, because we're going to talk about the mass starvation and horrific violence in Gaza, the current state of things. And we'd like to begin by showing you a terrible, disturbing, but brief video from Gaza. This elderly Palestinian man reportedly passed away this week in that video while he was silently standing there waiting for food to be handed to him. And as you saw, he simply expired before anybody could give him life-sustaining nutriment. Now we want to show you something else, one other video, to give you a small glimpse into what is happening now in the Gaza Strip. Rami, if you could share the video of the lady. This is somebody who was interviewed by Al Jazeera, she's been displaced, and she briefly explained to Al Jazeera how she arrived in her current condition. Have you got that up, Rami?
Oh, sorry. I had it shared the screen. Oops. Still not used to that. Oops.
So if you could turn on the sound so people can hear.
وضع بالمرة عشان أنا عايشة لحالي وحيدة. وين أهلك وين عيلتك؟ أبوي وأمي متوفيين والباقي العيلة في نواحي بعرفش يعني بسبب الحرب بتنقلش وما بسألش عن حد بضل لحالي. أنا بدي أكل لأني إلي 5 أيام مش واكلة بتصيبني دوخة بقدرش أمشي بقعد وبأمشي شوية وبقعد شوية بسبب هذا إني أنا مش واكلة إشي مش موجود إشي في المعدة. بدي أكل.
For those who couldn't make out, either don't understand Arabic and weren't able to read the subtitles, she said she hasn't eaten in 5 days. She lives alone. Her mother and father have passed away. There's no family members from whom she can seek food. And she's, as you can see, she's sitting there in the sun against a wall. And she said she's dizzy and weak and has difficulty walking. Now imagine somebody in her plight, hard to see how she could possibly survive, because in order to obtain food, she would have to travel some distance by foot. And where she's going to encounter, many other desperate, starving Palestinians, many of whom will be at least not quite as weakened as her. And so in that environment, how is she supposed to actually obtain any food? What hope does she have of obtaining food? She can't even get by foot to a humanitarian distribution center. And even if she does get there, she could very well be shot dead by these monsters. So this is a tiny glimpse into the utter horror that Israel and its Western backers are now inflicting upon the Palestinian people. According to the UN Relief Works Agency, it has not been able to bring food into Gaza since March 2nd. Okay, so we're talking over 4 months, 4 damn months. And there are mountains of goddamn humanitarian aid sitting at the entry points to Gaza, and they will not come in for one simple reason, and that's because this Nazi entity will not allow the food into Gaza. And we have irrefutable evidence that they're blocking the aid. We have irrefutable evidence that there's mass starvation in Gaza now. We have irrefutable evidence that this is an intentional policy of the Israeli government. We even have videos of these crazed, sadistic settlers hijacking or ransacking humanitarian aid trucks that are sitting at the entry points to Gaza. Zionists who are adamant that the Palestinian population must be starved. And despite all this, as I'm going to detail a little bit more in a minute, our governments support Israel, no matter what their rhetoric may be, in every imaginable way. Now, at the so-called aid distribution points that the genocidal entity has established in Gaza, it now massacres Palestinians on an almost daily basis. According to sources in Gaza hospitals, at least 115 Palestinians were killed yesterday, just yesterday, by Israeli forces, including 92 civilians who were attempting to access humanitarian aid. Apparently, that is the deadliest day at the so-called aid distribution centers in Gaza since this horror began. The Ministry of Health in Gaza also announced that within just 24 hours, 18 Palestinians died from hunger. That's one day. The Gaza Ministry of Health has confirmed that since the beginning of the Israeli military onslaught on October 7th, more than 900 Palestinians, including 71 children, have died from hunger. Over 6,000 others have been injured while seeking food or humanitarian aid. 6,000 people. No one could claim credibly that this is not a deliberate policy of shooting dead, mass murdering Palestinians who seek humanitarian aid. And that, by the way, I should say that the total Palestinian casualties from Israel's genocidal rampage now exceed 198,000 killed and wounded, the majority being children and women, with more than 14,000 missing. And that, of course, is just the official casualty count. The actual number of dead and wounded is likely to be much higher because large swaths of the Gaza Strip are inaccessible to the Gaza Health Ministry. We shouldn't assume that every person in Gaza who goes missing, the fact that they are missing is communicated to the Gaza Health Ministry. When the Gaza Health Ministry says 14,000 are missing, that's people who have been reported missing. What about those who are not reported? Imagine this lady, for example, that we saw. She dies somewhere alone. Unlikely that she would be reported missing because she has no family. She doesn't even have the ability to solicit food from somebody. So the fact that she's missing would be unknown to the Gaza Health Ministry. How many thousands, tens of thousands of Palestinians fall into that category? And of course, this number, 198,000, doesn't include the indirect deaths. This is the direct deaths. What about people who have chronic and debilitating, life-threatening illnesses, and they stopped getting treatment when Israel destroyed the healthcare system? What about people who contract illnesses that could be treated and dealt with effectively by medical personnel, but they have no access to medical treatment? So we may be talking at this stage about a number of killed and wounded that is far in excess of the 198,000, which is the official figure. The situation has gotten so bad that even Canada's pro-Israel, pathetic national broadcaster, the CBC, was forced last night to devote its lead story on its flagship news program, which is called The National, to Israel's mass murder of starving Palestinians. And
this is The National with Ian Hennemanson.
Tonight, hunger and desperation collide with gunfire in northern Gaza. Dozens are reported dead, more are injured, and the need for life-saving aid remains as critical as ever. What happened is becoming all too familiar. This time it was near a border crossing with Israel. A convoy of aid trucks was met by a crush of hungry people. That's when witnesses say the Israeli military opened fire. The UN says hundreds of Palestinians have died in recent weeks trying to get food. Just yesterday, at least 30 Palestinians were reportedly killed near an aid distribution site. Sasha Petrusik brings us the chaotic scenes from the latest incident and Israel's response. And a warning, some of these images are difficult to watch.
A panicked crowd runs down Gaza's coastal road. One group carries an injured man, yelling, "He's breathing, he's breathing." A father cradles his son's body. What was his fault, he asks. He just wanted to eat. Now they're targeting children. The road leads from Zikim, a crossing from Israel into northern Gaza. A little earlier, a convoy of UN aid trucks from the World Food Program had driven in. Aid workers say thousands were gathered, desperately waiting for food. Shots rang out, say witnesses, from Israeli soldiers into the crowd. Shooting, says Ibrahim Muqdad. Some fell dead, some injured. And if you managed to get a bag of flour, you kept walking. It's one of the deadliest days yet for Palestinians trying to get food. At least 85 died at different sites, say Hamas and hospital officials. 79 near the Zikim crossing. At the hospitals, doctors who are volunteering in Gaza confirm the carnage.
The floor is literally completely full of blood. Well, there are people bringing the next patient in, tripping on you, trying to find a spot. Sadly, no, this is not an abnormal day.
These latest deaths are on top of more than 875 others who were killed near aid distribution spots in the past 6 weeks, according to the UN. It's left some hungry but afraid, deciding to use smaller soup kitchens run by local charities. We used to go to the big aid sites, but not anymore, says Mohammed Ashraf Al-Qasas. Every time I'm 90% sure I won't come back alive. The Israeli military acknowledges the shooting at Zikim, saying its soldiers felt threatened and fired warning shots. But it disputes the number of reported deaths. Ian?
Israel's military, Sasha, is also telling Palestinians living in one part of central Gaza to move out. What's the significance of this?
Well, this is in a city called Deir al-Bala, which has been largely untouched by Israeli troops and tanks since the beginning of the war. The Israeli military believes that this is where Hamas is keeping the remaining 20 living hostages, and they're at risk. Now, though, Israel plans to expand its ground operation here, pushing out the Palestinians and leaving hostage families anxious. Ian?
Sasha Petrus.
Dimitri,
So, yeah.
I mean, I feel like CBC was able to curate images. Obviously, these images they've shown are quite terrible, but when we put it in contrast, right, these are people that are starving. We saw the footage of the old man sadly passing away while waiting for food, and the Palestinian woman who looks like she clearly hasn't eaten for over 5 days, as she mentioned. In every conflict, there's sometimes these images that stick, right? So in Vietnam, it's the little kids that were hit with napalm, and with the Holocaust, there's the pictures of the starving children. The image of Israel will have to forever be associated, the Zionist entity will forever be associated with these images of starving Palestinians. The CBC is not showing these images, but how do we because again, it's not just Israel that's starving the Palestinians, it's the entire Western world that legitimized the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, that has repeatedly cut funding to UNRWA, that were part of this whole charade to delegitimize UNRWA. How do we make sure that we don't only blame Israel for the starvation and associate these images to Israel as an entity, but also to us Canadians and Americans and NATO member states who have been truly just as complicit, if not more, for the starvation happening in Gaza?
We did by doing exactly what we've been doing, Rami, which is constantly showing in concrete ways how Western governments support Israel. You know, it's not just the military equipment. It's not just, providing economic aid. It's not just providing free trade benefits, so-called free trade benefits, even to Israeli businesses that are operating illegally in occupied territory. It's not just subsidizing organizations that funnel money to Israel, so-called charitable organizations. I mean, it just goes on. And we have to continuously it's incumbent upon us as journalists to continuously draw the connections between our governments and this monstrosity. As we've said many times, this is a Western genocide. That's what it is. It's first and foremost a Western genocide, because without Western government support and facilitation, it could not happen. Impossible that Israel could ever get away with this. In a region in which it is this tiny pipsqueak of a sadistic country, surrounded by hundreds of millions of seething indigenous persons, could never get away with this. It's only through the massive intervention, corruption, depravity of Western governments. I just want to say a few things about this report, Rami. He said it was over 30. As we said prior to that, it was actually over 90 people were killed yesterday at aid distribution points. Notice the doctor was from the West. The doctor who was briefly interviewed there said it's not an abnormal day. This is coming from a highly credible source. The Israeli soldiers said they felt threatened. With what? How are starving Palestinians supposed to act? Are they supposed to be calm? Are they supposed, when they see food and their lives are, withering away before their eyes, are they supposed to sit there quietly and passively? No, naturally, in this desperate state, they're going to rush for the food. They just want to be fed, before they die. So this is outrageous, and they call them warning shots. 92 people were killed, you sadistic Nazis. How is that warning shots?
Most
important,
important,
although I commend, I can't say I commend the CBC. I almost never watch the CBC. The only reason why I know about this thing is before we started the live stream this morning, because of how horrible things have gotten, I just went to the CBC website to check what they're saying. I almost never watch this, and I don't encourage you to watch so-called mainstream media either. But I noted immediately that they actually made this the lead story on their flagship news program, which I think is really a testament to how awful things have become. It's not a credit to the CBC that they did this. In fact, in that the very conclusion, the first thing that popped in my head when that report ended is, why didn't you seek comment from anybody in the Canadian government about this? Why didn't you point out to your audience the Canadian government just approved $37 million worth of military exports to this satanic regime? Why isn't the CBC drawing those connections that you and I are trying to draw every day, Rami, between the genocide and the policies of Western governments? Pathetic.
But most importantly, Dimitri, is that no one is telling Israel to play a role in the distribution of aid. If anything, international organizations and people on the ground in Gaza have been calling for impartial distribution of aid through organizations that are already on the ground. UNRWA has its own issues in terms of its relations with the Palestinians and its complicity in the status quo that has put the Palestinians into a position of suffering. But then again, right, there are networks already in Gaza in place being able to distribute aid. So for them to feel threatened, are they putting themselves in these positions where they intentionally want to feel threatened so that they could have an extra reason to keep shooting on Palestinians? This is a genocidal war on Gaza, on Palestine. The only purpose is ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing through starvation, ethnic cleansing of shooting people that are starving. And I believe now they've reduced the safe zones, although there's no safe zone in Gaza, down to only 12% of the Gaza Strip. That means that Israel has given themselves the right to shoot on Palestinians anywhere else on the remaining 88% of the land of Gaza. So yeah. I think the question here is that they weren't able to outsmart us. But when we hear this reporting on the CBC, no matter how much better it was than their coverage on Palestine before, they're still trying to connect the dots that the Palestinians are in some way provoking the Israeli soldiers, that they are threatening the lives of Israeli soldiers. I mean, this is absurd. This is absurd.
I look forward to the day when, editors of major Western media organizations are subjected to prosecution before a Nuremberg style tribunal. That will be a day in which I will uncork the champagne, because justice will finally be done.
Dimitri, now, just two more things. There's also the Abu Ubaidah did a speech on the 18th of July, which was 3 days ago. And I feel like it was one of the most openly critical speech of the Arab regimes, the ones that are complicit in the starvation of Gaza. In his speech, Abu Ubaidah mentions that in the face of God, the enemies of orphan Palestinians in the face of God are going to be the leaders of Arab states. And this is a form of condemnation I feel like that has been at least much more direct than before. And that maybe shows just the extent, an evolution in the struggle for the liberation of Palestine. Right now, we're much more openly targeting the complicit Arab states. And then there was also AOC, right, Dimitri, who defended her vote in Congress by saying that she agreed to only give defensive weapons to Israel. I don't know what defensive weapons are. She claims to be only replenishing the Iron Dome here. But this level of complicity in the genocide in Gaza, Dimitri, goes way beyond these Western states, but even these people that claim to be negotiating on our behalf, right? Anyways, any thoughts on this whole AOC thing, Dimitri?
She's a disgrace, an absolute. I used to actually like AOC. I was stupid and naive enough to think that she actually had some humanity in her. But at this stage, those illusions have been completely destroyed. And by the way, I would throw Bernie Sanders into that category. There's not a single person in the Democratic Party. And this guy that everybody's raving about, Mamdani in New York, seems like a nice enough guy. I suspect that deep in his heart, he's another AOC. Look, anybody who runs for the Democratic Party, you can't rely on them. I don't care what their rhetoric is. I don't know what their record may be. But at the end of the day, if they're willing to run for the Democratic Party, they are not going to be true to the cause of human rights, not with respect to Palestinians or anybody else in the global South.
Are going to be the stance on the genocide in Gaza who interfered the way they should, right? We're talking about the Ayatollah, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the comrades in Yemen and in Iraq, and in the south of Lebanon. I will never lose my time romanticizing with the so-called leaders in the Democratic Party who, are just delaying their complicity in the genocide, right? Or masking it as much as they can.
Yeah. So more late-breaking news. 2 hours ago, a whole bunch of governments put out a statement about this monstrosity that's unfolding before the eyes of the world. And interesting that this came out from the Foreign Ministry of Canada just after the National, aired that story last night. But here is basically what happened this morning. This is a statement from Global Affairs Canada. It's a joint statement on behalf of 26 partners on the occupied Palestinian territories. Well, hey, at least they have the decency to acknowledge that these territories are occupied. I guess that's something. So the statement, it's kind of a who's who of the West. Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and the European Union Commissioner for Equality, Preparedness, and Crisis Management together issued the following statement. These, by the way, are all the states, and they're missing a couple, of course, the most notable being the United States. It's not on the statement, are the very ones who are perpetrating this genocide. So the governments that are perpetrating this genocide through their rabid Israeli attack dog want us to believe the following. They say the suffering of civilians in Gaza has reached new depths. The Israeli government's aid delivery model is dangerous, fuels instability, and deprives Gazans of human dignity. We condemn the drip feeding of aid and the inhumane killing of civilians, including children, seeking to meet their most basic needs of water and food. It is horrifying that over 800 Palestinians have been killed while seeking aid. The Israeli government's denial of essential humanitarian assistance to the civilian population is unacceptable. Wow, that's likely to move Israel. And they go on and say Israel must comply with its obligations under international humanitarian law. Then, of course, they have to throw in the obligatory condemnation of Hamas. The hostages cruelly held captive by Hamas. These are actually prisoners of war at this stage. The ones who are left are soldiers in the genocidal army. They're prisoners of war, and they continue to lie about that. They say they suffer terribly. We condemn their continued detention and call for their immediate and unconditional release, and negotiate ceasefire offers the best hope of bringing them home. We call on the Israeli government to immediately lift restrictions on the flow of aid. And then they say We strongly oppose any steps towards territorial or demographic change in the occupied Palestinian territories, blah, blah, blah. We urge the parties in the international community to unite in a common effort to bring this terrible conflict to an end, blah, blah, blah. And then this is the money shot. We are prepared to take further action to support an immediate ceasefire and a political pathway to security and peace for Israelis, Palestinians, and the entire region. What? It's been almost 2 years of in-your-face, fuck you genocide, and all they can say is they're prepared to take further action. What action have they taken thus far? What action have they taken thus far? We just highlighted that the Canadian government authorized $37 million worth of weaponry to Israel in February of this year. The weapons continue to pour in. The United Kingdom is a signatory to this damn thing. The United Kingdom, is it cutting off the flow of weapons? Not at all. It is a major supplier of weapons. And I will note that one country from the West that didn't sign this was Germany. Yeah, Germany, which is, I think, the second largest supplier of weapons to Israel. That may have some reason, something to do with the fact that it didn't even have the decency to put its president's signature on this statement. And the disgraceful, disgusting, embarrassing, eternally to be condemned government of Greece didn't put its signature on this statement either. I also want to point out in regard to this statement, I mentioned that the European Union Commissioner for Equality, Preparedness, and Crisis Management has signed this damn thing. A few weeks ago, as we reported, a majority of the states in Europe voted for a review of the association agreement between the European Union and the genocidal Israeli entity. And a review was conducted. The conclusions, we don't know everything about the conclusions. Of course, they didn't want to give us a complete insight into what they found, so we don't need to be told. We know what's going on. The whole world knows what's going on in Gaza at this stage. They decided after they're getting their review that they weren't going to suspend the association agreement after all. And the pretext that they gave, this was all within the last few days. The pretext that they gave was that Israel and the European Union had struck an agreement about increasing the amount of humanitarian aid into Gaza. This is what happened yesterday is the result of that agreement. Okay, this is what happened after the agreement. The deadliest day at humanitarian distribution points in the Gaza Strip happened after that fucking agreement, that piece of garbage toilet paper agreement, which they're using as an excuse not to impose sanctions on Israel after they imposed 17 motherfucking rounds of sanctions on the Russian Federation, which has not been found by any court of law to be committing a genocide or even plausibly committing genocide. This is disgraceful beyond words, folks. Sickening, enraging. None of this means anything. It's just kabuki theater. All these genocidaires are doing is trying to convince suckers like us, chumps like us who pay taxes to these freaks, that they actually care about Palestinian lives when they're doing everything possible to exterminate the Palestinian people through their rabid Israeli attack dog. Now, I want to just say a comment about what they have done. Okay. The Canadian government has claimed repeatedly that it has paused certain, deliveries of arms to Israel. But as I mentioned, in February of this year, the Liberal government approved 2 permits for a total of $37 million of weapons exports. The timing of that decision was really quite interesting because Prime Minister Goldman Sachs announced, Mark Carney, Mr. Banker Extraordinaire, announced in January that he was going to seek the leadership. This is, Justin Trudeau announces he's going to resign in December. Carney comes out of nowhere. He's never been an elected official in Canada. The neocons and neolibs just plop him into the leadership. He denounces in January he's going to run. And then in February, just before Justin Trudeau hands the reins over to Mark Carney, they approve these 2 export permits. That's not coincidental, folks. They didn't approve them in February for no reason related to the change in leadership. They did it in February so that Mark Carney could say, well, that was the other guy. That was my predecessor who did that. I didn't do that. That's why they did it in February. They wanted to get the weapons to Israel, but they wanted the incoming prime minister not to have to wear this disgrace. But here's the thing, folks. if you ever hear that as an explanation, as any kind of an excuse for Mark Carney, his policies towards this genocidal regime, just bear in mind that Mark Carney has all the authority necessary under the law to cancel those permits. The fact that he didn't actually issue them, approve their issuance, doesn't mean he's powerless to do anything about it. And he hasn't canceled those permits, even as his government is putting out statements like this piece of garbage, which doesn't mean a damn thing. It's just more lies.
Sorry, Dimitri, isn't there also a loophole where the Canadians can sell weapons to the United States without needing the approval of the Ministry of Defense, and then these weapons can be relocated to Israel without having the without Canada being notified?
Yes, absolutely. And they've been caught red-handed doing just that. The Canadians have been funneling military equipment or parts for military equipment through the United States. But you know what? The ridiculous thing about that, Rami, is they actually don't need the loophole because they're continuing to send, weapons directly to Israel, and also buying weapons from Israel, and enriching these military industrial monsters in the genocidal entity. And by the way, I just have to, my hat's off to the Maple. It is the Maple, this small independent news organization to which I have been donating for years because they do such great work. They have done more to expose Canada's delivery of weapons to Israel during the genocide than all the goddamn corporate media put together. And the resources they have at their disposal is like 0.0001% of the resources of the CBC. It's just utterly, utterly disgraceful that we have to rely upon a couple of intrepid journalists with such a small budget to reveal to the Canadian public information that's readily available to the corporate media and can be more easily obtained and broadcast by them. I just want to show something, just to put a poison cherry on the cake. The one thing Canada has done, right? The one thing Canada has done was that it joined with, I think, 6 or 7 other states in sanctioning the most extreme lunatics in Netanyahu's cabinet. Smotrich, who I think is the finance minister, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who I believe is the national security minister. That was about a couple of months ago. The way that played out, you may recall we reported on this. The Canadian government, the British, and the French came together and said, if Israel doesn't start behaving, we're going to take concrete actions. And if they don't stop settlement expansion in the West Bank, we're going to impose sanctions. So several days later, after they put out this statement, Israel announces the largest settlement expansion since 1967. That was the response of the Israeli government. Not just Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. The whole Israeli government basically gave, Britain, France, and Canada the big middle finger. So at that point, these governments were caught between a rock and a hard place. To try and salvage whatever credibility remained to them, they had to do something. So they chose sanctions on the most extreme members of the government. And by the way, when they did this, the Canadian Foreign Minister, Anita Anand, emphasized, you can find this clip on YouTube, that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir were not part of the Likud party, Benjamin Netanyahu's party. Why would she do that? Why would she do that? Because she didn't want to, make the Likud look bad, even though it is the Likud that is more responsible at this stage for any party in Israel's depraved political environment for the genocide, for the suffering of the Palestinian people. She actually tried to, exonerate them by emphasizing that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir were from another political party. But it's even worse than that. I'd like to show you a statement that she made at that time. Could you pull up Kavita Algu's ex-post? Here's Foreign Minister Anita Anand around the time that Canada announced sanctions on Smotrich and Ben-Gvir.
Canada remains unwavering in its support to the state of Israel. Canada remains unwavering in its support to the state of Israel. Canada remains unwavering.
Yeah, we had to play that 3 times because you might not have believed your ears. So this is at the very moment that she's saying, "No, we're gonna sanction these 2 freaks, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir." unwavering in their support for Israel. And I don't know if you could tell, but when she was saying this, she was glancing down at a piece of paper. Okay, somebody this is the first thing went through my head. Like, do you need to see? Does it need to be written on paper? Canada remains unwavering in its support for Israel. I mean, you can't remember those words. You know, it's almost like she was told, you got to say this, and she wanted to make absolutely sure that she got every damn word right, because if she got one word wrong,
Handlers, Dimitri.
Ridiculous.
I think earlier, yesterday I was on a call with, and we were discussing about how in Australia they've come up with some big statements condemning Palestine, whatever, and it seems like it's all coordinated the same way, right? Reading the same statements. It used to be Israel has the right to defend itself. Now it's reinforcing the continuous support for Israel. I mean, it truly makes you wonder what kind of autonomy does Canada have in managing its own foreign relations and its foreign affairs.
Yeah. Zero autonomy, but, you know, they're very happy to be puppets of Washington. You know, Mark Carney has proven that in space. We were told that this is the man who's most qualified to stand up to Donald Trump. He's constantly capitulated. Every time Donald Trump threatens something, Mark Carney, you know, lies down like a doormat for Donald to step on. That's the prime minister who's best qualified to stand up to Donald Trump. So, not all news is grim, my friends. There is, I just want to say before we talk about the good news, because there is some, I just want to say about Anita Anand. I know Anita Anand, the Canadian Foreign Minister, personally, because before I started to devote myself more or less full-time to independent journalism, I was a securities class actions lawyer. I represented union pension funds and individual investors who had been defrauded in the stock markets. And at that time, Anita Anand was a professor of law at the University of Toronto, my alma mater, who specialized in investor protection. So I crossed paths with her on several occasions at conferences and you know, professional education events relating to securities regulation. And I must say that I never imagined that she would prove to be one of the most depraved political leaders of our time in this country. I mean, you know, to declare she's a law professor. Okay, she has no excuse. She knows what domestic Canadian law says about human rights violations, providing weapons to human rights violators. She knows what international law has to say about these subjects. She's better informed than 99.9% of Canadians. And she's declaring, as we approach the 2-year mark of a brazen genocide, that Canada has unwavering support for Israel even now. She has brought shame upon our law school and shame upon the legal profession, like so many other people who are unfit to practice law, but are nevertheless accorded that privilege in this country. So what's the good news? The good news, and God knows we need some, is that 8 nations have come together to finally take collective concrete action against Israel. Who are those nations? You'll notice that they are all from the global south, okay? Not one Western nation signed on. They are Bolivia, Colombia, Cuba, Honduras, Malaysia, Namibia, Senegal, and South Africa. They formed a group called the Hague Group. And the Hague Group that was formed on January 31st of this year. And its purpose was to organize, formulate, and implement collective action to hold Israel accountable and to stop the violations of Palestinian human rights. And they called for a conference that was held in Colombia on July 15th and 16th. So it completed last week. And at the conclusion of that conference, they announced that those 12 participating countries, or those 8 participating countries, and I believe there were 4 others, also from the global south, had agreed upon certain measures. Could you pull up the Hague Group announcement, Rami? Thank you. So the measures are prevent the provision or transfer of arms, munitions, military fuel, related military equipment, and dual-use items to Israel. It's interesting and encouraging that they included dual-use items in that category. Prevent the transit, docking, and servicing of vessels at any port in all cases where there is a clear risk of the vessel being used to carry arms, munitions, military fuel, related military equipment, and dual-use items to Israel. Prevent the carriage of arms, munitions, military fuel, related military equipment, and dual-use items to Israel on vessels bearing our flag. Commence an urgent review of all public contracts to prevent public institutions and funds from supporting Israel's illegal occupation and entrenching its unlawful presence. Comply with obligations to ensure accountability for the most serious crimes under international law through robust, impartial, independent investigations and prosecutions at the national or international level. So they're committing to pursue these criminals in domestic courts, not just in international tribunals, which, as we know, rarely see their judgments enforced, unless the object of the enforcement comes from the global south in a country that is regarded with hostility by Washington. And then lastly, and related to that, they say we're going to support universal jurisdiction mandate. So that is, the ability of courts to prosecute these war criminals, even though under normal circumstances, they would not have jurisdiction of the war criminals because they're not from their country and the crimes didn't happen in their country. That's essentially what universal jurisdiction means. So this was a very positive development. To my knowledge, this is the first time in my lifetime, not just during this genocide, where a significant grouping of states has come together and imposed a series of sanctions and accountability measures on Israel. So a positive development, to be sure. Something else has happened. I've talked about this in a couple of episodes. A poll came out recently. This is before the Donald revealed that he was not going to disclose the Epstein files. It was done by Quinnipiac University, and it showed that only 12% of Democrats had more sympathy for Israel than Palestinians, whereas 60% had more sympathy for Palestinians than Israel. So this was done in May, and it was published in early June. The Republicans, a significant majority of them, continued to have more support for Israel than Palestinians, but the number that had more support for Israel than Palestinian, more sympathy, had dropped by 14 percentage points from the prior poll, which was done, I think, in the middle of last year. And I think after the Epstein scandal blew up, and people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and others who are so influential in the MAGA movement, openly accusing the Mossad of having been behind Epstein's trafficking of children, sex trafficking of children, you can be sure that there has been a further significant, if not devastating, decline in Republican support for Israel. Now, another interesting thing that happened, which is development that I regard as positive, which for reasons I'm going to explain, this independent media outlet I mentioned, the Maple, has done one other great thing, and it's done a number of really fine things in terms of reporting on the genocide. But they set up a database of Canadian citizens who have served in the IDF. And the two main journalists there are David Mastriche and Alex Kosh. David has actually been investigated by the federal police at the demand of some Zionists because he set up this database, which is perfectly legal what he did. But nonetheless, the RCMP got a complaint and decided they were going to investigate the damn thing. Now, in response, there's been quite a hullabaloo in the Zionist community. Could you pull up, please, Rami, Afraid to Go Home? So this is an article that appeared in the Times of Israel, not a Canadian newspaper, the Times of Israel 2 days ago. I actually think it might have been yesterday. And you'll see the headline is, "I am afraid to go home. Canadian IDF soldiers fear fallout from war crimes probe." And they specifically refer to the website established by the Maple. So this is good, folks. It's good that they're afraid. This will deter people from continuing to serve, or if they're thinking about serving for the first time in the Israeli military, there's hope that they will be deterred from doing so. Although anybody with even minimal degree of human decency shouldn't need deterrence to refuse.
don't you find it absurd the way they wrote the word afraid to go home, like home, obviously being Canada and not Palestine, where the Palestinians are from?
Yeah, they're serving in the military over there, but they regard this country as their home. Wow.
It's just absurd, right? Willing to go fight for some odd country and then knowing you're going to go back home, right? So is it fair to call them mercenaries, right? Genocidal mercenaries.
Well, that's precisely what they are, but they're not doing it for the money though, because the money isn't good. A lot of them actually, this is the mind-blowing thing. I mean, a lot of these people can earn more money than they can in the Israeli military by staying in Canada and just, having a conventional job. That's how committed they are. That's how brainwashed and sick these people are, that they're willing even to take an income hit, risk their lives to go over there and participate in a genocide, and then complain that they're afraid to come home. Wow. Related to this, an Iranian hacker group, I talked about this on social media, called the Handala, actually managed to leak into some databases and obtain personal information of thousands of Israelis who are connected with the military and intelligence elites. I found this, the Western media has essentially ignored this story. I found this in some alternative media from West Asia, this story, this revelation. And with the help of some people, because the articles that I found which talked about the leak didn't actually tell you how to find the documents, which were available somewhere online. So I put out a call to people to help us do that. And somebody found them online, and I have now downloaded them. And there's thousands of these documents. Many of them are in English, many are in Hebrew. And I just need to find the time to start going through them. But this is going to presumably help, or hopefully help, in holding these individual war criminals accountable, identifying them, and then holding them accountable in a court of law. So another thing, that a very positive development, if you could pull up Belgian court, Rami. A court in Belgium has ruled that further transit of all military equipment to Israel for its ongoing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza has to stop. It has ordered the cessation of these arms from the delivery of these arms from the Flemish region of Belgium to the genocidal entity. And the judge found that the Flemish government has systematically failed to uphold its legal obligations under the Genocide Convention and imposed a fine on it for each military shipment to Israel that may still go through. And I just want to remind you that one of the countries that signed that, melodramatic statement that was put out this morning on behalf of 26 governments was Belgium. Belgium put out that statement, and yet just a few days ago, a Belgian court had to order the government of Belgium to stop sending weapons. This is how dishonest these people are. They're just flagrant liars. They lie as easily as they breathe. Quite remarkable. But this is a very good precedent, and one that may be of utility to us here in Canada. As I've talked about before, I'm part of a group of 7 lawyers working pro bono on behalf of 2 Palestinian Canadians. We are prosecuting a claim against the Canadian government under the Genocide Convention, claiming that the government, with complete justification, I should say, that the government is violating its obligations under Article 1 to prevent genocide, under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention, and it's also violating the constitutional rights of our clients, particularly the right to security of the person and the right to equality. That case was filed in November of last year. The Attorney General of Canada brought a motion in the spring to have the case dismissed before trial, and even before we get into what is called discovery, where the government has to give us the evidence, the relevant evidence in its control. That motion is going to be argued in the court in Ottawa in late November of this year. So I have a feeling that I have not yet been able to review the Belgian court's decision, but I would expect that it is going to be helpful to our cause, because it was based, at least in part, if not entirely, on the Genocide Convention, the very convention upon which we're relying here in Canada. Now, another interesting development, there has been a rash of suicides in the Israeli military in the last couple of weeks. You can see here, this is a report that was published yesterday and by a Turkish media outlet. A fifth soldier died on Sunday from suicide. 4 others had taken their lives in the prior 2 weeks. The total number of Israeli soldiers who have taken their lives, this is what's acknowledged by the Israeli military, right? The number may be far higher, but apparently, based on the disclosures of the Israeli military, 19 soldiers have taken their lives this year. No one should celebrate the taking of a life, a suicide, and I certainly don't. But this is, and I'm not putting this up here to suggest this is good news, but it is certainly indicative of the immense strain that this nearly 2 years of genocide is having on the Israeli military. And this is just one manifestation of that strain. There's tens of thousands, if not over 100,000 reservists refusing to show up. I've seen multiple reports of Israelis refusing to answer the call at all to go to enter military service and choosing instead to go to jail. It's not many of them, but there are some, and I commend them to the greatest possible degree for their courage and their dignity and refusing to serve. There's also the fact that there are multiple reports about Israel's munitions running low. It's apparent from successful ambushes of the resistance in Gaza, including one in which I think 5 of these terrorists were killed in Beit Hanun, that the exhaustion is impacting their performance on the ground, and which is making it increasingly dangerous for them to participate in the genocide in the Gaza Strip. So, and this is just some of the indications the Israeli military is under extreme strain, probably the greatest strain it's ever experienced in its existence. And if we continue down this path, eventually it's entirely conceivable that it'll just collapse or, go into open revolt. This is not something which this pipsqueak of a country can sustain for much longer, I would think. So what else is going on? I do want to comment on the Hague Group summit. As I mentioned, there were, I think, 12 states that signed on to that multi-part commitment to take steps to hold Israel accountable. But there were a whole bunch of other states that took part in that summit that happened on July 15th and 16th, and I'm going to mention them to you. These are states that took part but did not sign that statement: Algeria, Botswana, Brazil, Chile, China, Indonesia, Ireland, Lebanon, Libya, Mexico, Nicaragua, Norway, Oman, Pakistan, Portugal, Spain, Qatar, Turkey, Slovenia, Uruguay, and Venezuela. Now, the signatories of the statement made clear that it's going to remain open, and they are hoping that countries are going to join before the next session of the General Assembly, I think, begins. I think it's in September, October. But I can't for the life of me understand why these states did not already sign on. And I have to say, I'm very disappointed in China. China is one of Israel's largest trading partners. This statement that they put out didn't even call for a total trade embargo on Israel. What it focused upon was the shipment of dual-use items and military equipment, and prosecuting Israeli war criminals. So this wouldn't even have required China, if it had signed on to the statement, to completely sever its trade relations with Israel. But frankly, China should have done that. Every state should do that. Every state has an obligation to do that under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention, to impose crushing economic sanctions on this demonic regime. So, and then to see predominantly Muslim states like Pakistan and Indonesia and Qatar and Libya, Turkey, that windbag, Erdogan, always going on and on about how terrible those damn Israelis are, while his country allows, oil to be shipped off to the Israeli entity, which is undoubtedly used in part to continue to fuel its military adventurism. These predominantly Muslim countries couldn't sign on to this statement. Just unbelievable, folks. I hope that they'll all sign on before September, but what are they waiting for? They need to have some robust debate in Parliament or in the halls of power. Haven't they seen enough horror? Anyways, let us move on. I think at this stage, Rami, given how much time I've spent ranting, I'd like to hand it over to you.
Yes, Dimitri.
And talk about something which I think is a wonderful story.
So, Dimitri, last week, I was supposed to join in on the live stream, but I was a bit sick. And I was just thinking about what made me sick, right? And basically, I have an uncle who lives in Guangzhou, China. I had the opportunity to go see him there. He used to live in Montreal between like 1998 till 1991 or so. And he was part of the Palestinian advocacy group at Concordia University, which I was also part of, but later on in 2014. And it just, when he left Montreal, he moved to Saudi Arabia to go work or whatever in Jordan and Palestine. And then some things happened. He decided to move to China, but he thought he wasn't going to stay there for a long time. So he moved all of his belongings to Canada, thinking that he would come back to Canada and live a life there. But he ended up staying in China for 15, 20 years or so. But he came back recently because we sold our grandmother's house after she sadly passed away. And we were going through, and he had to basically get rid of the storage since he had nowhere to put these boxes in. So he came to Canada just to go through 30 boxes. And he was only looking, like out of all of the 30 boxes, there was like some very nice Palestinian decorations and some artifacts from his travels across South America, Africa, the Middle East, Asia. In reality, there was only like 2 documents that he was looking for. It was my grandfather's birth certificate. My grandfather, who sadly I hadn't got the opportunity to meet since he passed away 1 month before I was born. He was born in 1922 in Jaffa, Palestine. And the other document that he was looking for was for my grandfather's diploma. He graduated from AUB in either 1943 or 1946, the American University of Beirut. So we were going through, every day we would go to the warehouse, go through boxes. And the first day, it took us 4 days to go through 30 boxes, but the first day we found nothing. The second day, we went through maybe half of our boxes and we still found nothing. And then by the end of the third day, right, we got through maybe 75% of the boxes. I'm like, Haitham, my uncle, did we accidentally throw the birth certificate and the diplomas? How likely would it be that we're going to find all these important documents on the last day? Then he's like, don't worry about it. I know we didn't throw it. We're going to find it. Then on Thursday or Friday, that was the last day, we go through basically all of the boxes. There's only 2 boxes left. And I tell my uncle, do you have hope we're going to find a box? And he jokingly said, as Palestinians, we can't afford to lose hope. And we just persevere. And the birth certificate and the diploma are going to be in the last 2 boxes. And then we end up opening the 28th box, right, which is the before last box left. And we find a tube. And he picks it up and he's like, oh, I found it. And I'm like, are you sure? He's like, no, but let's open the tube. He opens it and we find not 1, but 3 documents. And this is my grandfather's birth certificate. As you can see at the top, it says Government of Palestine. And he was born on the 3rd of August, 1922.
Okay. Is it possible for you to enlarge that, Rami, so that people can...
So what I could do is, I'm going to open it in a different way. Okay. So can you guys see a bit?
No, I can't see it.
Sorry. I'm still, yeah. So if you can, are you guys able to see the document?
Yeah, I can see it. I assume the audience can see it. If we can't, please let us know, everybody.
Okay.
Maybe this is good enough. I actually, when I put this on my full screen, I can read it.
So it says Hassan Muhammad Yahya Taha, and that was my grandfather's name. And you could see here it says Government of Palestine, and that was because between 1917 and 1923, inclusive, right? It was the transition period between the establishment of the British Mandate of Palestine, and then in 1923 it became the British Mandate of Palestine up until 1948.
Sorry, so this was during the British Mandate, right?
This was during the Mandatory Palestine, which was like a phase between 1917 and 1922,
Right.
And
so
the British Mandate of Palestine. So,
okay. So I just want to, people can't see it's in Hebrew and Arabic. That's why it was interesting that it's both Hebrew and Arabic.
So at the top it says Government of Palestine, and then you can see over here the name of his parents and the doctor who assisted in the birth, which was Dr. Haddad. And you could see at the bottom the stamp and the seal basically authenticating this document. And just going through this this document, really, like this is pre-Nakba. This is 1922. This is basically the official tie of my people to this land. And in some way, like this document summarizes the reason why I've been trying to contribute as much as I can to the liberation of Palestine, right? So I feel like I owe it to my grandfather, who was born in Palestine and sadly in 1994 buried in Montreal. So this life of exile. But this
is your paternal grandfather?
Paternal grandfather, yes. And
can you tell us a little bit about his trajectory in life after he was born? And he was born in Haifa.
He was born in Yahya, and I haven't met my grandfather because he passed away 1 month before I was born.
Yeah.
But I did go through this family picture book where I saw some great photos of him. So he graduated from the AUB. I have a picture of his diploma, but maybe it's not as useful as this other document that I'll show. But after graduating, he went back to...
Sorry, just so people know, the AUB is the American University in Beirut. Right.
And then he moved back to Palestine. And this is something I didn't know, but after graduating, he started teaching in a high school in Palestine. And this is this document that we were able to find, which is from the Amariya Secondary School in Jaffa, Palestine. At the top here, it says Government of Palestine, Hukume Palestine, at the top over here, and the address in Arabic. And this document, it's hard to read handwritten Arabic, but I was able to use some translation app, and maybe some people that are able to go through this text a bit easier than me can maybe write it down and translate it in English in the comments. And it basically says that it's a letter from the high school where my grandfather was teaching in, basically excusing him from his teaching duties and allowing him to, basically recognizing that he was forced to flee out of Palestine into exile. And it says, due to the circumstances that our people are currently facing in Palestine. So this letter basically acknowledges that weeks or days prior to the Nakba, their circumstances were so awful that people were forced to evacuate and flee due to preserve their own security. And I feel like this document symbolizes the Nakba, right? How the conditions in which the Palestinians were in, and I also feel like when I was translating this document, I really don't feel like the person writing this letter truly understood what the fate of the Palestinian people and the state of Palestine would be like for the future, for the upcoming years, right? Yeah. So. And we're talking here about circumstances and the difficulty that our population is facing currently. This is 78 years later, right? Our people are still facing genocide, dispossession, displacement. So this was quite an interesting document to find, and we're obviously going to digitalize it. My uncle took it back to China, where he's going to bring it to some person who will be able to preserve it properly, and then we're going to. I'll try to share it with some museums and historians so that we can make sure that this is documented and kept forever. And also the paper is very well preserved, right? Like this is a document that is over 78 years old.
And they made paper really well back in those days.
Yeah, of course, of course.
This is fantastic. I'm so happy you found this, comrade. Really, this is pure gold, pure gold.
And I was I googled up the school, the Amaria Secondary School, and this school does not exist any longer. It's in Jaffa. The building apparently is intact. There was a women's school right in front, and I feel like one day I would love to go to this to the premise of this school and try to understand how my grandfather could have, lived through his footsteps a bit, right? In the place and establishment where he was teaching other Palestinians. Yeah.
You are living, breathing proof that the Palestinian people will never be defeated. I honestly, I say that with all love and respect. And of course, your family as well. All Palestinians alive today are a bridge to the future of the Palestinian nation, which I think we will see in our lifetimes. I remain as convinced as ever. So thank you so much for that, Rami. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's a beautiful story.